let's talk about what's been happening in the primary market. And, even though it seems like activity is heating up after the recent lull, performance of recent listings has been quite muted, in fact, which is keeping investors quite wary of subscribing to this fresh lot of IPOs. Sharad is here with what the major concerns for the primary market are right now, and of course, some of the recent IPOs as well. Sharad?
Well, yes, the primary market action does seem that there is a kind of a hiccup coming in, as there is not a single, like a barrage of mainboard IPOs coming in. They are coming, but they are coming in a very slow format. Now, the major concerns, geopolitical tensions are of course there, which make the primary markets a bit questionable. Domestic cues are still remaining mixed, trade uncertainty is there, and a falling DI participation is there, and of course some new companies are there where the DI participation in anchor book is missing, and that is the main board IPOs. Now I haven't seen that in a very long while. Now of course exits are also coming in via blocks, be it the promoters or even the MNCs going ahead. So overall the primary market action is not suitable, is what it's looking like. The immediate impact, of course, we had seen fall in grey market premiums of certain companies, and Zepto has delayed its IPO plan. Selective mainboard IPOs are coming in. At least you could see like once a week one mainboard IPO is coming, and also the very weak participation in SME IPOs. Of course, we have a very stricter stance, and we did investigative pieces on SME IPOs as well, where we could see the reactions also coming when it comes to their listing as well. Now there are upcoming IPOs also, larger IPOs coming in over the next 2 to 3 odd months. 72 odd companies worth 1.4 lakh crores of major IPOs coming in. HDB Financial roughly 12,500 crore rupees, Hero FinCorp almost 3,700 crores, and NSDL almost 3,500 crore rupees. But let's have a chat with Pranav Haldea from Prime Database. Good morning, Pranav. Sharad here. And of course, the primary market, especially the main board IPO, that seems to be cooling off when it comes to the interest. And we have been recently seeing in the anchor book list of even Aris Infra, no DI is actually there. So are you thinking that in the main board IPO, is the steam over?
Well, I think it's too early to say that. The steam, in fact, has barely started, for us to call it to be over. You had March, which was after a month, after 2 years, where you did not see a single main board IPO. And even in April and May, you've seen, very small deals. You've not really seen a big ticket IPO coming to the market. As you rightly just said that, the pipeline is, of course, staggering. There are about, 74 odd companies looking to raise 1.5 lakh crore, which are holding SEBI approval, and another 70 odd companies looking to raise 1 lakh crore, which are waiting for SEBI approval. And some of the big deals, like you mentioned, in terms of HDB and a couple of others, which are likely to hit the market soon. So I think it's still too early to say. Yes, the response to some of the deals in May has been slightly muted. The listing has also not been great, but I think we need to give this some more time. As we know, the primary market essentially takes its cue from the secondary market. And of course, there are concerns. The most major one right now is on the geopolitical side, with what's happening with Israel and Iran. If that doesn't really throw a spanner in the work, I would expect some larger deals to get launched in the near.
Well, Pranav, the unlisted space has heated up. Of course, NSDL and NSC. Now, they are also bound for an IPO. And in the unlisted space, also a lot of action is happening. And the prices itself, look at the NSC unlisted prices. From May onwards, it has jumped more than 50-odd%. So these large companies which are already trading in the unlisted space, how do they look like, when they come for their IPOs? Do these valuations get questionable? Or do we see a kind of a downturn or a valuation downturn when it comes to their IPO numbers? Especially if you'd like to talk on NSDL, NSC, this is very famous and a lot of people deal in the unlisted space for these stocks.
Well, I won't comment on specific IPOs or specific companies in the unlisted space, but I think you've had a mixed bag. There have been some multi-baggers in the past few years, where investors who bought in the unlisted space made good returns. At the same time, in 23-24, you had several deals, again, without taking names, wherein investors are still sitting on losses. So I think it is investors need to tread with caution, and it is not necessary that you will make a significant gain once the company lists.
There's a very questionable part in the IPO space, the SME IPO. Largely, you could say that the surveillance is a bit little, and of course, the sizes are also small. But of course, we look at the investigative work which we have done, and there's been an impact by ET now as well. I would like to just point out: do these SME IPOs, all of them are good? Because at times retail gets, trapped. So, what are your views on SME IPOs right now?
Well, this space has seen a lot of action in the last year and a half. I was just looking at the data, and the average number of retail applications in the SME IPO space was just 297 in calendar year 2020. So that means that per SME IPO, only 297 retail investors were applying. This figure has gone up to 1.87 lakh in calendar year 24, which shows the huge increase in retail interest which is coming to this space. Again, a word of caution, these are very small companies, their business models are not completely tested. Even as far as, the liquidity and the trading is concerned, it's very shallow. There's a lot of volatility in these stocks as well. So yes, while some of them do end up become multi-baggers, there are several IPOs where investors are sitting on significant losses as well. So investors need to tread with extreme caution in this space.
All right. I just have a question now. As an investor, if maybe I'm first time in the markets, and in the primary space, I would like to ask a question like current IPO markets, is it good to start applying? There was a euphoria 2 years back, but now it seems like it's a wait and watch system happening. So what would your advice be to a newbie retail investor who is currently entering the markets?
Well, my advice to a newbie investor would be first to go through the mutual fund route if you are for the first time coming into the market. If you are slightly more adventurous and are willing to take a bit more risk, then look at the 2,500 already listed companies where there have been significant disclosures over the last. There's a track record which you can study. If you want to take on more risk, that's when you can look at the IPO market. And even within the IPO market, then I think it's very important for an investor to introspect and figure out whether you are coming in for a listing gain or are you really coming in for the long haul. If you're coming in for the listing gain, then you may apply to all IPOs. You've seen in bullish market, typically all IPOs then give a good listing pop, and then you should exit on the listing day because you really came in only as a listing pop investor. On the other hand, of course, if you're coming in for the long haul, then you need to do the hard work. You need to study the offer document, understand the company, the promoters, the governance, its business model, its financials, and then take a call to invest.
And Pranav, MNC IPOs, that's also a lot of interest has come in, especially with the valuations which the Indian markets offer. And everyone is looking at LG Electronics IPO. Of course, the size is expected to be roughly around 14 to 16,000 odd crore rupees as per reports. So how attractive the MNC space is looking like, especially for the listings in India? And what will be the way forward for this?
Well, I think, a lot of these MNCs which are looking at listings have essentially become like Indian companies. They've been in the ecosystem for a long time. These are, consumer companies, extremely familiar to the Indian space as well. I would imagine, from a governance standpoint as well, there would not really be too much of a challenge. And given, the demographics of India, I think, a lot of these companies are poised to grow exponentially in the years to come. So I think, with every IPO, I think for an investor, there are two things to look at. One is the kind of company which is coming in, and secondly is the valuation. So you could have a very good company coming in with an IPO, but the valuation may be stretched. So again, that makes for a poor investment. So you need to look out, IPOs where the company is also good and the valuation is also good.
Well, very important insights coming in for a retail investor from Pranav. Pranav, one more question is there. I track the new age tech companies as well. The class of 2025, a lot of new age tech IPOs, of course, on the higher side, the IPO sizes are also larger. So how does this pan out? And this time, will it be a higher valuations or will it be lower valuations? Because of course there is a correction we have seen in class of 2021, 2022 and how they have seen the market perception. But this time path to profitability is also very important. So how do you see this, the class of 2025, the new age tech companies, coming in for the bosses?
Well, as far as the valuations are concerned, my view has always been that valuation is an art, it's not a science. So, uh, apart from the day of listing, the closing price on the day of listing, when one can, really make an assessment and say that, look, was the IPO overly priced or underpriced or fairly priced? And the reason for that is very simple, that, on the day of listing, the share becomes available for trading for a wider set of investors. Domestic, foreign, retail, institutional, long, short. There are no restrictions which are there, which are at the time of IPO. And hence we can say that on the day of listing, there is some, kind of a price discovery which has happened. And where the share ends at the end of the day is really, can give us a sense of how the IPO was priced. But beyond that, I think, it becomes like any other listed company whose share price will go up and down on the basis of the company's own performance, how the sector is doing, how the broader market is doing, how the broader economy is doing. So, to look at, let's say, if you're sitting in 2025 and looking at the 2022 IPOs and, doing an analysis of how many of them are above issue price, how many are below issue price, I think it's an exercise in futility. And the data also shows this, that, there were some of them which are, which have performed very well since 2022. Some of them have failed to even reach the issue price. So I think, again, it's a very selective issue. And with every IPO, which even comes from the NATC space, my advice would only be to, look at each of these companies, study the company, and also look at the valuation. We cannot pass a generic statement. There are some, very interesting business models out there. The only drawback with this, as far as retail investors are concerned, is that there may not necessarily be a peer group company with which they can compare the valuation. In which case, I think investors should follow the queue of QIBs and look at how they are investing.
Thank you very much, Pranav, for giving a detailed and a comprehensive view on the IPOs, the SME IPOs, and what should a retail investor do when it comes to the IPOs. Now I'll give it back to my knowledgeable anchors. Thank you.
Okay, Shana, thanks for taking us through all of that. And also, Pranav, thanks so much for joining us on the show and giving us a sense